Sorry if you're shy.
That's all right. Thank you. All right, I'm holding it. And I assume people can hear. First I'd like to thank Pyohio for having me, and Pi or Kleppy for allowing me to give a preview of the talk on July 13th. And this is what it was called then. I subtitled it GUI AI Laying Tools, a Speed Run, because it's also, in my proposal, I bit off way more than I could chew. Okay, so there's a fair amount of speed through and hand waving here. So I make a bunch of assumptions about you personally because I don't go into various things that you may already know. I don't explain Docker, I don't explain a large number of things, and I also expect that if you really are curious, you'll dig into here, go to the original documents, and run through some tutorials. There are some setup instructions that I'll have in the repo. They'll be up shortly. Okay, so it's not a code walkthrough, but more of a tourist map of a destination you might want to go, kind of like I'm going to Dublin and I get one of those laminated maps. Okay, there will be some minimal code up on the screen, but that code is, it's from the documentation. It's not exactly runnable as it is, but you can contact me for help on some of it, but I don't actually know deeply all of these. But it's how to prototype quickly with Flowise, n8n, how that's similar and somewhat different from various LangChain tools that are not all owned by the same company. We cover some of that. Yeah, and we hand wave as I run out of time. And we'll explore some practical changes. Okay, challenges. My background, I've been in medical data with some of the people in the room for a fairly long time. If you're from Cleveland, I was also at the Poverty Center at Case Western. They have Neo Can Do. The people who work with the city are also aware of those. I'm currently at Blue Sky AI. AI is kind of where we live, and we help small to medium-sized businesses with their AI challenges when they don't have in-house groups. I have past experience with a bunch of, call them GUI tools. NiFi, MuleSoft, DataWeave, which is getting data into Salesforce. Mirth Connect, something called Talend Open Studio. If you are ever asked to work with it, run. And huge integration systems where often each touch point may be its own special flower and have its own configuration. Okay. My initial biases are I don't like to hide the logic in the GUI. I like transparent diffs. I like commits and change tracking. I like tickets. But I also like scaling and containers, which also means that I have kind of an antagonistic relationship initially with some of these, but I'm also convinced at some of their uses. So, but I'm aware of my biases and I'm trying to mention them, and I'm happy to entertain other ideas if you have different experiences, and I'm really curious to learn. So, okay. So this is to remind us that there are patterns everywhere. There are LLM architecture patterns. You may have been at a bunch of the other talks. There are agents that have tool sets. They think within bounds. You describe tools, they use them. There are hierarchical discussions between LLMs, like, hey, write me the best prompt. This one is critiquing it, send it back, and loops. If you were at William's talk, he covers some of that with the Crew AI stuff. That can be done in much larger sections, and they can be more complex. A lot of people talk about Retrieval Augmented Generation, and the naive version is fairly easy in the first tool. There are a bunch of SDKs out now, and we're only looking at the purple pieces. Those are my to learn later list. But each of them has a strong focus, and each of them attempts to abstract away, like we do in Python, so many things. So rather than keep track of your tabular data, we call pandas, right? Well, this allows you to take the level of abstraction further. My original attempt at this when I didn't realize how huge it was I was going to have a take-home, go ahead, set it up, and run it in 3 different ways, small mini project. While I'm still working on that, I think there are going to be a bunch of pull requests in my own repo. And feel free to comment when you find things that don't work. So a portion of that was to have a MySQL Docker, talk to them, and have a decision in a RAG where you ask the agent, hey, what are our HR policies around our learning budget? It knows to go into the memos, or how many customers do we have? It goes into the other side. Yes? Actually, these are 4 containers that are running on the system right now, which that's also my reminder to say, hey, by the way, my system may bog down. They are completely different, although n8n could use the other ones. Okay. Yeah, we'll run through. Okay, quick comparison. This is kind of AI's take on it. n8n, I don't find as easy to understand its GUI. I do find it easier to troubleshoot. Flowise, I understand its GUI somewhat better, but its documentation is a real pain. Because of the lag in LLMs, every time I ask Gemini, hey, what's wrong with my thing, it totally confuses multiple layers of, of the documentation. So, so in particular, Flowise, both of those have influencers who are very good, and I link to them. One of them is Leon Van Zyl, and he is both supported by them, and he seems to be faster than their documentation. LangFlow is LangChain in a visual manner, and in fact, each one of these is very familiar under the hood. So n8n is TypeScript under the hood. It's mainly used for automation projects. You can tap LLMs into it, so people give examples of, I've automated cleaning up my email, and it gives me a summary in the morning. But those tend to be in your own home lab. Flowise is TypeScript LangChain. LangChain comes in both Python and TypeScript flavors, which is strongly typed JavaScript. And I'm starting to see the appeal of strongly typing in Python too. So, okay, more patterns. So in Flowise, this was the original plan in terms of, hey, I send a chat trigger, I ask the LLM a particular question, it hits an if, sometimes that's an agent, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you pull the whole schema beforehand, and it decides, hey, do I want to go to, do I want to call the tool for SQL and then query it and then give a response, or do I want to take the other path and then call the memo database? Here's a shortcut to my running a local. Here is their getting started. It can be as simple as this. You need Node. I don't recommend installing it globally. I tend to prefer the Dockers. Official tutorials are here, and then there's Mr. Van Zyl. I'm going to go to the next slide because this says, hey, here's my interactive slide. And click on this little bubble. So this is running in Flowise. What's your name? And I've given it a quirky prompt. So it may ask some really, it may respond with some really bizarre things, or it's broken again, which has happened several times today. This is, the container itself is local. It is calling an off-the-shelf LLM, like many things are, and that's all routing, and you're adding pieces to it, okay? This may be super slow because I turned something else on. So LangFlow and Flowise may be competing with each other at the moment. But usually what it comes back with is, what does it really mean to have a name? Can an LLM have a name anyway? So, something very metaphorical. And the reason is because of, let's go back. If I click to my running local, this is the version, and of course. So I gave dummy values for the setups for each of these, and now I'm in n8n instead. Here's the Flowise one. Okay. And that's lovely. They're admin 1, 2, 3, 4 for the setup when you're in it. All right. Well, that's also why I did, I had pictures. Although what I really, really want to do is shut that off and try to get in. You ever try to type a password when you got a bunch of people looking at you? All right. By the way, when you set it up yourself, the forgot password goes to the admin, which is you. You can set it up without without any password. So we're going to move on. It looks like this, which may be hard to see in this fashion, and I'll make it bigger again and then zoom in. So they're literally clickable boxes. So the things that you would normally have, you have an LLM, you put in an API. This maintains the conversation chain itself of who's who, which is surprisingly difficult sometimes, particularly when you're using a voice agent. The voice agents can't tell when it's speaking that it's it, or whether it's you, and there's a lot of trying to figure out the conversational silences and the overlapping talk that ends up happening when you use a voice agent. So I've had one that was not tuned very well, and I said, tell me a joke. And it said, haha, that's very funny, even before it told me a joke. Because it couldn't tell where we were in the thing. So what I like about Flowise, API key organization is it's literally a clickable. It's reachable everywhere. Naive RAG, which is querying a database and adding that context into what you're using, is also very easy. Re-ranking is less easy. Tool use can be easy, and multi-agent interaction is. So this is an off-the-shelf moderation, which will say, hey, I won't talk about pressure cooker bombs or enriching uranium, which is exactly what my kid did the first time I had to talk to it. They did get pretty far down the how do I make my fireworks more dangerous path, but this was literally just sanity and stress testing it. This maintains the current memory, and then this here maintains the back and forth. It gets more and more complex, but you can imagine that when you start to write all of these things in code, the more complex your agent, the more you have to keep track of. And when you're in a client situation, like I've got Anthropic up and I've got Claude, it's the client itself is maintaining all of that for you. But if you're trying to put it into a product somewhere else, or you're trying to put it in the cloud, you have to keep track of all that yourself. Things that I don't like. It maintains its state in a database while it can run in a cloud. If it were to keep that database on-prem in the Docker, then I would imagine it would eventually run out of space. So you keep that off, particularly if you're going to run it in Kubernetes. But the reloading that state and rerouting the same question with the same session to the same container starts to get complex. And if you destroy that container and it's not all the way through, there are pieces with that are a challenge, that if you're doing it in code yourself, you have more control over. More patterns. We're switching over to n8n, which hopefully is actually running. This, again, is also very easy to start up. In terms of running a simple flow, it comes with a, hey, this is nice and simple. Here's your introduction to the GUI. This thing is an event that when you click on it, it says, hey, I've run. This is, right now we're just faking simple data. But what I like about it is that it has an input side and an output side because it's frequently used for transformations. And you can pin that data here because your input may be really complex to reproduce. So at the last talk, if you were trying to troubleshoot your whole flow of 10 million families whose coupons you're going to them, that may be a multi-level thing that if you could just chain your input to the beginning and then pass it through the tests to the next pieces, that's a desirable thing. And that's why I say it's easier to troubleshoot with this one. We can run it, we execute this step, it gives us some fake data, it pins it. We can jump out into the next piece, and it's going to edit fields, and we can run that. And basically, it's doing a summary of the data. Now, you can pass in LLMs to this. You can have webhooks that wait for responses from other data. And n8n is kind of the ultimate integrator, whereas Flowise is more of a starter tool set. They have a very quick start. This is a 15-minute video that I would recommend. And this is the same bubble that is probably still trying to respond. Okay. And down here, expand, move along. All right. The thing is that these can get super complex, which is both good and not good. And that would help. All right. And for the longest time, I didn't know that little dinosaur existed. All right. So they can get super complex and super spaghetti, and this is literally a feature request for being able to reorganize this smoothly. And we have some of these where I don't actually know everything that's going on in them. My coworker builds them, he's brilliant, and in part this talk is a way for me to understand the balancing between the how do we build it fast, how do we know all those capabilities, how do we then reproduce those capabilities in other ways that are bulletproof, and or are there ways to run these other options in production easily that are more bulletproof? Because I always want to know, how do I restart this thing? And when I say, how do I restart this thing, I mean, like, at what point in the day can we refresh it? And how do we update it seamlessly without there being a problem? Okay. And expand again and move on. So you're starting to see why I had the metaphor of the webs and the various beads and or the other patterns. Shifting back to Python, at a bunch of the other talks, there are a lot of intersections. So, lang chain does its own methods of abstracting. I'm a dead tree addition guy because I highlight everything, and then I'm like, oh, what was that again? Not always, but they use decorators in order to say, I'm going to make this whole function with this LLM or with this prompt chain into a runnable object that I can chain together, and that's why it's called lang chain. So it takes those high-level concepts of this is the conversation manager, and this is the LLM, and it uses a bar operator that we would usually use for OR to take those runnable states and feed them through each other. Although, if you were at the previous talk, you're then like, okay, well, that can also be spaghetti. And is that level of abstraction entirely a good thing? But at the moment, it's what we have, and this thing moves so fast that 2 weeks from now, different tool sets may become more prominent. Different LLMs may become more prominent. So it's an interesting situation when you start building a thing, and you're like, oh, I'm halfway there, and there's a better way to do it. So this is not mine. There's an attribution. But it's a way to envision all of the things that it's currently handling. In the case of RAG, you split text, you embed it mathematically, which we've talked about mathematical embedding earlier in the week. The prompt templates, if you've got, let's say you've got Siri, you want Siri to have the same personality everywhere, at every touch point. And often you do that with a prompt. So you want that fed everywhere, but maybe their person has personal preferences and they only want to be talked to like a pirate on every Thursday. You also carry that with you. So that piece is another variable and it goes into your chain. And that's carried along with the system prompt. Can't read it? Well, one, that's the repo, and two, I've actually got a better way to view it, which says if I go here, to the APIs, and you read down here, this is kind of the list of what it's saying that you're abstracting. So chains, chat models. The other point is that each LLM has a slightly different way it wants to keep track of it. Like one of them says, you're the user, and one of them says, you're the human, and one of them calls it the agent, and one of them calls it other things. So LangChain waves hands, abstracts that away, and then you add a particular agent executor or a particular agent parser, and that helps you to be able to swap out a different model easier. And they'll deprecate models on you in the middle, and you're like, oh, that one's ever so slightly different. I need to cope. And that helps you with that maintenance. Okay, so we'll go past the thing that didn't read very well on screen. Okay. That's a very short article that's linked. So, so this is the making a chain out of things that I mentioned. So the prompt here, system, you are a helpful assistant. This is the background data. Human input, that's the first thing. Then you call a model. You've injected a particular model. Generally, you've set a specific flavor of a specific model, and they have different purposes. Some of them can handle images. Some of them can't handle images. And when people talk about this corpus of knowledge that I've read into it, that's maybe my, let's say I'm a tile manufacturer and I sell tile online, and I've got all my catalogs on there. There are pictures, there's tabular data, there are images, there may be diagrams. Each one of those is read radically differently. And PowerPoints are a mixture of both image data and diagram data and potentially tabular data. So you need to have different document ingesters for each of those. So LangGraph keeps track of complex workflows. It's the thing that keeps track of all those little lines in between the boxes. It keeps track of the whole conversation state in a way, because if you just call the API and you say, tell me a joke, it may tell you the exact same joke because it doesn't know it's a fresh instance. So you need to bring the entire conversation along with you when you do that. That gets messy. Okay. So Langsmith is interesting because it is more managerial. It is a broader enterprise use case mostly. It allows you to trace where it went in, how it routed, how it comes out, what the prompts were, what the responses were. Yes, there's a PHI problem there in some cases, or privacy. And your mileage may vary. A lot of these are available in hosted methods on the web versus open source. So you can host n8n or Flowise yourself. You then get all of the maintenance problems. You can host Langsmith, which is open source, yourself, but you can pay them to it, and they take care of some of the compliance stuff. If we jump, I think I already have this open. Okay. And of course, my personal one does not have much data. All it really has is an error I created earlier. But it gives you observability, tracing projects, monitoring, It can, unlike a bunch of other things, tell you how many tokens you've used across how many other things. Thank you. And I know some of us that play with these things want to know how much money are we burning through, particularly when you're having it read a whole code base and helping it to refactor. So there's quality insurance. There's particularly that is the personality stable across places, because at one point there were multiple inputs, there are multiple touch points. Maybe you call it, right? And if the prompts and the technologies are slightly different, how do I manage to make a consistent user experience for people across points? Then you need a method of testing that. Lang serve is being deprecated. They, again, want you to go up onto their cloud, but this is a way to mash this with fast API and then call it with an API. I already hit the 5-minute mark, so I'm moving faster, and I told you we would wave hands. Lang chain hub is take Hugging Face, if you know what that is, which is kind of a it's a giant Git repo where people show off their particular tuned models and their particular model expertise. And in some cases, you can download the non-proprietary versions of those, and you can use them locally as your LLMs. But if you take Hugging Face and you take GitHub and you mash them together, it's a place where people have their really good prompts, and you can search and load them yourself. And if I had gotten the Flowise demo to work, the really analytical version of the LLM was actually from that. And there's a step where you can actually go through and pull it. This is Lang Flow, which is Lang chain under the hood. And this literally has inputs, outputs. You can pull out an agent. You can make these little boxes. You can get in. In under 5 minutes, I won't attempt a live build because I've already had enough technical errors. But the nice thing about Lang Flow was that I was hoping that it would be Lang chain under the hood and I could transform it back and forth. That's a feature request. They are not owned by the Lang company, and they are owned by DataStax, and they're being acquired by IBM. So I don't know if that externally will happen, but it potentially could. Again, the visual GUI is really nice for being able to experience, prove out, think of all of those things. In a home office sort of situation, it's fantastic. And in a proof of concept situation, it's fantastic. And for a small business, when you can make it stable and hold on to it and then understand how to A/B switch out a new one, it can work really well. And I know it does for some. So these are the setup options. This is literally the commands that I ran, although it took quite a while to download because I thought I had the Docker in here and I didn't. Okay, so broadly, Flowise and n8n can simplify building AI flows. Docker can make it nice and stable, although some of the things that you may attempt to download and run, there's a thing called Ragflow that is a 10 gig Docker, and that's not fully loaded. Ground my machine to a halt. So cloud run or a different machine is necessary. I believe that persistence is critical for data integrity, enterprise integrity, and they're generally freeware, thank you, but they're really kind of driving you to their hosted situation in order for pay, and I don't know that that means that they're ever going to make the transformation back and forth to code. You can export a lot of the pipeline settings as JSON, and you can put them back in, but I'm not aware of a Terraform-oriented or an Ansible-oriented way to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be done. It just means I don't know it, and so do some of the CI/CD people that I know. So I feel that it allows you to learn the strategy, the patterns, the interactions. You can iterate very quickly with it. You may want to rebuild that using one of the other SDKs, which were in the front, maybe not necessarily LangChain. I'm looking at Crew AI after William's talk. I think that having the raw code may allow you to deploy seamlessly. There are some other options. So this particular quote is attributed to Winston Churchill, who actually attributed it to Paul Samuelson, who's another economist who knew Keynes. But the point is that I'm open to learning, and I'm positive someone will see this on the internet and say, yes, it can be done. When I asked Gemini to double check me, they're like, well, there's case studies on n8n. I looked at those today, and they're not very deep. There's a deployment section in Flowise that also looks promising, so you may be interested in that. These are all links. They'll be available. Thanks for everyone for listening, for Pyohio for having me, and again for Fleepy or Fleppy. Not positive if it's consistently pronounced, but for helping get me started on some of these and going deeper and letting me have a draft.